Take a look at what happened.
Mr. Sullivan, I just want to ask you a very brief question, which is, who's in charge at these sites?
It is crystal clear in my mind from when I was an agent. The site agent, the site advance agent, crafts his or her plan, presents it to the lead advance agent. Ultimately, the lead advance agent is personally responsible for signing off on the entire advance package, all the sites, airport, motorcade. And then that's presented to the field office supervisor and the detail supervisor.
The task force final report states, the general practice of the Secret Service is to assign its agents to focus on the area inside the secure perimeter. With the AGR complex outside of the secure perimeter, Secret Service deferred to its state and local law enforcement partners to cover the facility and surrounding area. However, due to the Secret Service's failure to confirm with their state and local counterparts that the AGR complex would, in fact, be secured with assets assigned to guard the area, there were no patrol members of federal, state or local agencies monitoring the AGR complex from which Crooks fired on July 13.
With respect to accountability, the Mission Assurance Review has identified deficiencies in the advanced planning and its implementation by Secret Service personnel. These employees will be held accountable, and this agency has among the most robust table of penalties in the entirety of the federal government. When the site was selected, the advance team went about identifying areas of concern. The AGR building was one of those hazards that was identified.
Based on your review and analysis, what is the reason, what's the best explanation for why there was not law enforcement personnel covering the roof, physically on the roof itself, or making sure someone could not get on top of the roof?
So ultimately, Pierre, we have to be very direct and clear when we're talking to our state and local counterparts. There was a discussion about how the roof was going to be secured, and I think what it came back to is we should have challenged how that mechanism was being implemented. There was an assumption that they had it covered, but there clearly was not that follow-up to make sure.
The failure to effectively communicate to local law enforcement that we need to have uniform presence out here, better line of sight mitigation. They are supposed to identify hazards, risks, and then mitigate those risks effectively.
One point of contention between the Secret Service agents and the state police is the meeting at the police barracks on July 9, which was followed up by a walkthrough on the 11th. The site counterpart, who assisted the site agent, spoke about this meeting during her Senate and task force interviews when she was asked who was responsible for securing the AGR building.
So the Lieutenant, Harold, was kind of the main police counterpart that was working with the Secret Service. On Tuesday, he said, after we're talking about the site and putting assets in different places, he said, and obviously we all agreed that the AGR building is closed. It's going to be a concern. And he talked to the owner. He said that they were willing to close the business for the day and that the doors would be locked and it would be secured and posted. I didn't ask specifically who was posting that building. He told me it was being posted and I took that to mean it's covered. It wasn't just, those particular posts. We had, 4 posts in front of the building.
There were 4 PSP and sheriff posts there, but they were on the other side of the fence. She also mentioned Butler Township police posts on the other side of the building, but they were tasked with traffic duty. Her notes about the meeting were included in the task force final report.
Discuss the AGR building and how it was a concern. Lieutenant Harold said that he talked to the owner and coordinated it to be closed, locked, and posted. There would be roving posts from Butler Township on the outer perimeters, no vehicle or foot traffic. So I took that as the doors to the building were locked. Nobody would be able to get in. It was secured so that nobody would be able to drive into the parking lots, and then that it would be posted with patrol units.
How would the parking lots be covered? Which agency was doing that?
I didn't ask him who was posting. I just thought it was 2 patrol units, in cars but standing outside of their vehicles.
During the lead advance agent's Senate interview, they introduced her note about this July 9 meeting.
USSS meeting with PSP and Butler EMS counterparts to conduct first draft of police postings and assets. Per PSP, the AGR would be closed for business and secured.
She was referring to Lieutenant Harold and another PSP lieutenant, and she took it to mean the building would be locked and not accessible to the public. She was then asked if she understood there would be additional coverage surrounding the building, to which she replied,
In the plans that we made with the local and state police partners, postings were supposed to be in the area of the AGR and other buildings that were of concern. They would deter and enforce and mitigate anyone that tried to access the building or the area around it. There were police postings in that area that would have had line of sight on the AGR buildings. I believe it's posts 4 and 5 that look like they're in the area of that.
When she was asked if she was aware at the time that there's a fence between posts 4 and 5 and the AGR, so it's not readily accessible, she replied,
I wasn't aware. I didn't recall the fence going all the way with no openings on that side.
When asked if she heard the words locked and posted from Lieutenant Harold, she said,
I heard that once from him and didn't hear any further discussion.
The message you took away from that meeting in the barracks on the 9th is that Pennsylvania State Police is going to be managing the postings around AGR.
The message I took was that the police postings would be in the area of that building and that it would be taken care of. Not which entity, just it would be taken care of.
And they would be outside that fence line?
They would be outside the perimeter.
There were no postings outside the perimeter near AGR. The site agent was also at the July 9th meeting, but doesn't mention these comments in her Senate or task force interviews. When the Senate asked about her understanding of patrol around the AGR building, she said,
It was never brought up to my attention that the police will have specific assignments around the AGR building. Once we have designated an inner perimeter and an outer perimeter, anything outside of that inner perimeter, it's more like local law enforcement decisions if there's any issues or anything that needs to be brought up to Secret Service concern.
You're saying that because the AGR building was outside the perimeter, you and your Secret Service colleagues made clear to the locals that it was their responsibility to cover it. Is that right generally?
In general, yes.
Lieutenant Harold was interviewed by the task force and was asked if he recalled this conversation where he allegedly said the AGR would be closed, locked and posted. He said,
No. There was some social media they were putting out there that the AGR building was going to not let people park there. But at no point did I ever say that PSP was going to secure, lock, that site down. If I would have been asked to, secure that site, I would have reached out to Butler Township first to see if they were able to do it, because that's in their primary jurisdiction, not PSP. I didn't reach out to AGR. I was never tasked with AGR. If we would have been tasked with that, we would have walked over there and looked at that site. We never did that. We never looked at it, and it was never discussed that PSP would handle that.
When asked if he mentioned anything about AGR during the meeting, he said,
If I mentioned anything about AGR, I probably said that the company was not going to allow parking at their site, and that was it. I don't know which day it was, but there was discussion about AGR not allowing people to park at their facility, and the church wasn't going to allow people to park at their facility. That was all, just like small talk.
I had 2 walkthroughs at the site. There was a walkthrough on Tuesday. It was just a brief to get familiar with the property. We went back to the barracks. We pulled up an image of the farm show on a smart screen TV. We drew the fence line, spoke a little bit. The main meeting at the site was Thursday, and it was with the same 3 Secret Service agents. Our walkthrough was Thursday. We were inside the fence line of the farm show, and we picked they picked their stationary post where they wanted troopers assigned within the perimeter, and the AGR building was never discussed.
Okay, so we could have surrounded that building with, say, 8 or 10 officers, and it probably would have mitigated the threat the AGR building presented. Fair to say?
Yes.
And the Secret Service didn't ask you to do that?
No.
Did they ask you to maybe put up some stakes around the perimeter, police tape, no trespassing? They asked you to do that?
No, I knew AGR. I knew the parking was restricted that day. The business was not going to allow parking, but there was no other communication regarding the AGR. The Secret Service did not ask me, as the officer in charge of PSP assets, to post a car, a trooper, at the AGR International property.
And even when we walked that property on July 11th, we walked right past that fence line, and they never said anything about me putting a car over there. I would have reached out to Butler Township, and it would have happened. It did not happen at all.
But according to Butler Township Police Department Lieutenant Matt Pearson, Harold did reach out to him to put a car by AGR when they were near that area at the July 11th walkthrough.
Lieutenant Harold asked if I could put a patrol car in the parking lot that is on the east side of that building, of the AGR building. And I immediately said, no, I don't have enough men to do this. I cannot do that.
Butler's chief deputy sheriff said he was there, and Pearson did tell the PSP he didn't have the manpower to secure AGR, only for traffic. Harold was asked about Matt Pearson's statement in his task force interview.
He remembered pretty clearly, at least from his perspective, that you asked him about putting a patrol vehicle in a AGR parking lot, and that he immediately told you he wasn't able to. Do you recall that conversation?
No, I don't recall that. And if it was a discussion between Matt and I and he wasn't able to do that, the request never came from Secret Service to post anybody over there or secure that.
I asked you if you recalled it. Would you be comfortable saying that that conversation did not happen, that you did not approach him about a patrol vehicle in a parking lot?
He gives a lengthy answer where he repeats that he doesn't recall, but doesn't definitively say the conversation didn't happen. Drew Blasco from the BTPD and ESU suggested to Pearson to put barricades in front of the parking lot, and they did so.
What they requested PSP to do was primarily the security of the farm show inside the fence line. So adequate troopers, I had 30 troopers inside that fence line once the motorcade arrived.
Speaking about posts 4 and 5 on the opposite side of the fence from the AGR buildings, Harold said,
They were covering the grass area between those two fence lines. We were there to make sure nobody jumped that fence or came through that area.
Regarding concerns mentioned during the walkthrough, the site counterpart said,
The AGR was definitely a concern. So we put posts along the fence line, looking at the AGR. And it was, to be so that nobody would come up on the fence line and there wouldn't be foot traffic along that property.
She said it would be their responsibility to remove any crowd gathering along the fence.
Or if they couldn't physically do it themselves for whatever reason, that they would reach out to command to have somebody come remove the crowd.
4 and 5 appear to be within the fence, so there are no post standers around or on the AGR building. Did that concern you?
So the posts, 3, 4, 5, 6, those posts, they're posts that are facing the AGR building, and it's actually very close. And you can see the whole one side of the AGR building.
The lead advance agent told the Senate she reviewed the Secret Service site diagram and the PSP ops plan.
And did the lack of coverage of the AGR building raise concerns to you?
From my knowledge of what had been asked and briefed to me from the site agents and from Pennsylvania State Police, is that we would have local police postings in the area.
The state police operates independently from our local partners and works together with full and part-time local enforcement agencies, but we do not have administrative or operational oversight over local law enforcement agencies or county sheriff's office.
Lieutenant Harold said he didn't have any oversight of the postings of Butler Township Police, who were strapped that day, controlling traffic, up to Meridian Road and Whitestown, as well as Brady Paul Lane. The task force final report states, between July 11 and the event, BTPD completed its operations plan. The plan directed officers to keep their intersection clear when Trump's motorcade is arriving and departing, which included managing traffic and congestion. BTPD Lieutenant Pearson said their only assignment from the Secret Service was to control numerous intersections along Meridian Road, and police were expected to stay at their posts while Trump was on site. The site counterpart said BTPD would have been right outside the AGR building on Whitestown Road, and it would have been one of their areas of responsibility they could provide coverage for. But the task force final report states, contrary to Secret Service expectations, neither state nor local law enforcement had vehicles or patrol personnel posted in the AGR complex parking lot or along the adjacent road. There were no officers otherwise responsible for keeping passers-by off the property. Lieutenant Harold said that during the July 11th police walkthrough, his major asked who had those buildings, and the Secret Service said ESU. And then another lieutenant suggested to use their resources to cover the parking lot. It's possible this was Lieutenant Pearson, who, as mentioned earlier, had apparently told Harold he didn't have the manpower to park a car there. The site agent said that during that walkthrough, Harold's agency, the PSP, told her they didn't have the manpower to secure the building.
At that point, our response was that the Butler County ESU unit would have coverage of that building, whether it's inside, outside. The Butler County said they will have coverage from that building. We said, well, that should be enough for the amount of police presence that we have outside of the fence line, and covering from the water tower, and having other aspects of, police around. That should be good enough.
You said that?
Yeah.
And do you remember who you said that to?
No, I believe maybe it was part of the conversation with PSP at that point during the walkthrough.
She didn't take any additional steps to secure the area, considering the outer perimeter more of a local responsibility.
It's part of the planning for the Butler ESU unit to be in charge of, to have some coverage of the AGR building. They will provide local police, local counter snipers to be inside the AGR building, but did not specify specifically how they're going to secure it, whether they're going to be conducting sweeps. Because I would think if I am inside the building for officer safety, I will make sure that that place has been swept and that there's going to be someone outside or at least someone around the building to be secure.
When Secret Service counter-sniper team leader John Marciniak was asked if he told anyone during the advance process that the local AGR snipers would have coverage of the roof, he said,
I did not tell them that the AGR building team per se would have coverage of the roof, but it was kind of expected that your police officers in your area, you control over your immediate area. For example, if something was happening in the barn underneath the post I was on, I would expect me to be able to handle any situation, whether it involved a sniper rifle or my pistol or less than lethal means, that you're still a police officer, even though you are part of the sniper team.
The lead advance agent said,
That local sniper team was supposed to be there for the purpose of being a sniper. Their overwatch, their counter sniper, whatever tactical reason they have there is for a tactical response. It's not for overwatch of a building. It's not for security of a building.
Good morning. My name is Edward Lenz. I'm a patrol sergeant for the Adams Township Police Department in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and a commander for the Butler County Emergency Services Unit. I was the commander of the local tactical units operating at the Butler, PA presidential rally on July 13th. At no point during the planning process was Butler County ESU asked to secure the AGR complex, nor the perimeter surrounding that area. The counter sniper walked through with us at the planning meeting, so they knew where we would be. They knew what our plan was. They never requested a formal copy of our plan.
This was all verbal.
Correct.
Right? And you never got any written guidance of how many assets to put where?
Correct. And it was our decision to place those snipers in the second floor of that AGR building. They were aware of that, certainly aware that they would be there, but there was no feedback or guidance that they wanted them there, that they didn't want them there, but really by not raising an objection.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Butler ESU sniper team leader Matt Wagner also worked on the plan. They didn't see themselves as counter snipers who look out for sniper threats. They assumed their role was general overwatch.
They didn't specify that they wanted counter-sniper actions to be taken. They didn't specify if they wanted overwatch actions being taken. So our automatic assumption was it's overwatch. That's what we do. And then they informed us later on they were going to have counter-snipers, so we figured, okay, cool. Both entities are covered. So as overwatch, we are generally outside of the event. We're on the outside perimeters of the event looking in. We didn't anticipate it as far as somebody being on the roof of that and using it as an elevated platform to take a shot because there was no staircases or exterior means of getting up there.
He said their responsibility was inside the event and expected BTPD and PSP to be responsible for security around the perimeter. A sniper in the building, Mike Mirko, said he was told uniformed officers would be in the area that day. A deputy commander for Butler ESU, Danny Crawford, understood the mission was to look for threats inside the perimeter and right along the fencing, including some of the area up to the AGR building. When asked if there was discussion about the ESU placing people around the building, he said,
"If we were asked that specifically, we would say that wasn't our requested mission, nor would we have had extra people to do that. That would have been a patrol function. We are a specialty team."
One of the Beaver snipers in the AGR building told the Senate they were responsible for some of the purple area, the yellow area, and some of the dark green area. From left to right, this includes the magnetometers at the entrance, the crowd, and the stage. This is roughly reflected as the yellow area in this coverage map developed by Butler ESU sniper team leader Wagner. The coverage area doesn't include the area the shooter fired from. Trump's position was about 130 yards south of the shooter, speaking to the crowd to the west with the Secret Service snipers behind him. Besides the AGR position labelled B, local snipers were also in the grandstands and press box labelled A, with the blue and purple coverage areas. This is where Wagner was positioned on the day. He said,
So looking back, knowing the difference between the Overwatch and counter-sniper, if they would have said we want counter-sniper coverage, and were very clear about that, then yes, we wouldn't have been posted up where we were on that. So my position in the announcer's booth at the grandstand, I could see the majority of the roofs at AGR, but they were 380 yards away. So it's one of those, I wasn't watching the roof because I was watching the crowd.
The Secret Service counter-sniper team leader said,
"When we were there on, I believe it was the day of the event, I was shown a printout. It kind of had something that we call cones of fire. That was shown to me, and the teams both had line of cones toward the magnetometers as well as over the crowd, both teams. So they had cross coverage, basically. When they showed me that and instructed that that was their plan, I understood. I had no problem with it, and that was it."
When asked if he expected the grandstand team would have coverage of the roof, he said,
"One of their cones of fire did go over towards the AGR building. It basically went over the crowd towards the AGR building itself. So I extremely expected that they would have coverage of said area. Inside the building in the window, you're kind of limited in what you can actually see out. However, any sniper or counter-sniper for that matter, you can move around, reposition, move up to the window, move back to the window. It served some purpose, but it wasn't what I would have picked. I would have picked the barn, which is what I picked. Does it help to have people there to see what's happening in the event? Yes, I imagine. But it's a magnetometered event. Nobody should have weapons in there."
Generally speaking, the observation of the crowd is the responsibility of the post standers or police officers that are posted in the crowd. Because the theory being, everyone in that crowd has already been screened. So it would be very difficult for someone to get a weapon inside the secure area already.
So the idea that there would be, a gunman, not to say that it's not impossible, but there would be a gunman in the crowd, that a sniper at a distance would be able to identify and take an effective shot, seems very unlikely.
It seems highly unlikely, in my opinion. Again, the threat at that point, from the counter-sniper perspective, is outside the perimeter, in the area that is outside where the magnetometers are set up. And that's the reason why you have the counter-snipers. Because the theory being inside that perimeter, the people have already been screened, and to a high degree of certainty, there is probably no weapons inside the secure area.
Thank you. Commander Lenz and Mr. Blasco, did that mission seem unusual to you, that you were outside looking in at a screened crowd?
It did not. We didn't receive any direction from the Secret Service as far as how they wanted our sniper teams to deploy or what their actual mission would be. So our snipers on our normal missions, they deploy more as marksman observers. So
What was, what was your mission as you understood it that day?
As we understood it, it was to deploy sniper teams to overwatch the stage, the crowd, the venue area where most of the people would be gathering.
Nichols said he couldn't see the stage from his position due to a combine in the way. He described setting up on the day of the rally.
We were advised by Butler County to occupy a building which was the AGR building. We were to occupy the second floor of the building and observe over basically the entrance of the event, through the crowd, to the rear of the event from an elevated position away from the event. I didn't understand the purpose of what we were instructed to observe. Because we were observing the crowd in front of the stage as opposed to looking out away from the event in toward, I don't know how to explain that, but we were looking from back into the event instead of in the event out. It's a secured entry point, which everybody was screened coming through, and, we're overwatching with lethal force. I found out that morning what my assignment was. So once we were taken into the location that we were to occupy, Butler County had pointed out a couple different positions that they identified as where they would like us to post. There were 3 or 4 different positions that Butler basically said, these are the positions that we have identified that we think offer the best observation of what we would like you to cover. You guys go ahead and get wherever you feel is necessary. So my sniper rifle was set up in this second window here.
He set up around 10:30 to 11 that morning, and his Beaver sniper team leader, Jason Woods, set up in the hallway window on the side of the building.
It made more sense than what mine and Mirko's were, because he had the entry point. So he had people actually coming into the entry point, prior to going through a secured location. I assumed there was going to be somebody on the exterior of the building. Typically you don't put guys in a building that is not secured.
Mirko said he was in the third second floor window going west to east.
We were able to move throughout the second floor, window to window with binoculars to get a better observation of what was going on around the building.
Earlier, in response to criticism about not seeing the shooter on the roof, the ESU claimed to be further away in the first and second windows.
Our area of responsibility was facing into the crowd, into the rally. The way we were positioned inside the building was we were not meant to be seen. I'm sitting approximately 50 inches off the window, and it is up to you to report any information back to command as far as suspicious behavior. Our field of view was limited. We were not able to see the rooftop that Crooks was on.
From their positions inside the AGR building, the snipers were not able to see the roof where the shooter was located. And again, that was not within their area of responsibility.
Eli Crane, who filmed this video from the second floor, spoke at a later part of this task force hearing.
We investigated the second floor window. Secret Service agents and local law enforcement had access to overlooking the roof from where the shooter engaged the former president. I was able to confirm that had anyone stationed in the second story at AGR building come off of their weapon system, moved to the window, and looked out the window during their search to reacquire Thomas Crooks, they would have seen him within 30 to 40 yards of that position. He would have easily been spotted lying on that roof with no camouflage and his rifle.
The Senate interim report includes this photo and states, the photograph above shows the approximate field of view from one of the positions occupied by local snipers positioned in the AGR building on July 13, 2024. As can be seen in the photograph, from this position the local sniper would not have been able to see Crooks either during his transit of the roof or when he took his final firing position. The photo is taken from Nichols' position, which was further away than Mirko's, and doesn't show the view from against or out of the window looking left. A lesser known photo report includes a somewhat better picture from this location. The interim report claims, although local snipers would not have been able to see Crooks from their positions, they had access to a break room on the same floor of the AGR building. It was possible for a local sniper in the break room to position themselves so as to be able to see Crooks' location on the roof while remaining concealed inside the building. The photo report also included pictures from the window Mirko stuck his head out of after the shooting and Eli Crane filmed his video from. showing the shooter's position could be seen from inside. Neither the photo or interim report had any original pictures from Mirko's third window position, but the interim report did address Rowe's photo taken from there. They include his earlier testimony asking why the assailant, who was positioned at the yellow arrow, wasn't seen from this sniper position. Local law enforcement snipers stationed in the AGR building who spoke with the committee said that the acting director's assessment did not align with their point of view. When asked about the picture presented by acting director Rowe, one local law enforcement sniper stationed in the AGR building told the committee,
I'm not exactly sure where they took those pictures from, but if they were taken from where I was, they would have literally had to be hanging out the window.
The quoted sniper is Nickel.
Even if my gun barrel was hanging out the window of the room that I was in, I still wouldn't have been able to see him down where he was at. I mean, you just couldn't see that far down.
If someone had alerted you and someone says, there's someone on the roof, at that point you have the ability to put your head and rifle out the roof and look for someone. Is that right?
I could have found a way, yeah. I mean, the windows, they had screens on them. But I mean, if somebody would have said, there's somebody on the roof with a gun, I would have busted the window out. And if I would have known or heard that there was somebody on the roof when I was up there, I mean, there's a window I could have climbed out of.
Commander Lenz, who had been talking to Nickel over Ops 4 about the search for Crooks, was notified someone was on the roof 3 minutes before the shooting, but didn't pass this on to Nickel or Mirko.
So in the minutes prior to the shooting, had someone radioed in over Ops 4, there's someone on the roof, you would have had the ability to find a window suitable enough to get a viewpoint over the roof?
I don't know if I would have because I was down on the floor. Had I been there, yeah, I would have found a way to get out on the roof.
Nickel went down to the first floor before the shooting, but would have had time to come back up if Lenz radioed. Mirko was listening on the same channel, and he was upstairs the whole time. The task force said to the site counterpart,
You said that you went to the AGR building a few days later to look from your vantage point in the window and saw that they could see where Crooks was on the roof. They are saying that they would have to be sort of hanging out of the window to kind of see that. Was that your take on it also?
No.
The Secret Service counter-sniper leader said the ESU pointed out the building to him and said they'd be in 2 windows facing the crowd.
They could look around windows, they could look outside, see anything on the rooftops. My understanding is with those buildings you can lean up against a building window and you can look left to right, but I did not go over there and physically see it myself.
The site agent was surprised the AGR snipers were in the building and not on the roof.
But it was brought up to my concern that the reason why they were having a local counter-sniper inside the AGR building was because they would have direct line of sight with that rooftop that day.
So it's your testimony that someone in Secret Service communicated to you that the local counter-sniper team would have line of sight to the roof of the AGR?
Of the AGR rooftop, yes.
At no point during the planning process was Butler ESU asked to deploy a sniper team to the roof of the AGR complex.
When asked whose call it was within the ESU to not put any snipers on the roof, Butler ESU Assistant Sniper Team Leader Blasco said it was a joint decision between him and 2 others.
Was there also concern about the heat that day and having people out for 8 hours?
The heat was obviously a factor.
Deputy Commander Crawford said,
If you're on that roof, you have to be watching all around yourself, okay? In that building, we could have ourselves locked in that building and not worry someone sneaking up behind you and focus mainly on your area of responsibility.
Good morning, members of Congress and of the task force. My name is Drew Blasco. I had the unique perspective of wearing 2 hats for this rally. As an ESU member and assistant team leader of the sniper unit, I took part in some of the planning meetings, which included interaction with the Secret Service.
I fucking told them they need to post the guys fucking over here. I told them that the Secret Service. I told them that fucking Tuesday.
Blasco said he meant to say Thursday, July 11, not Tuesday.
But you were there at the planning 2 days earlier, is that correct?
Yes.
On the 11th? Is it true that within minutes of joining the walkthrough on the morning of the 11th, you shared your concerns about AGR complex? With whom and what did you say?
I did share my concerns with the agents, from my understanding, that were in charge of the site that day. I explained to them that the snipers inside that building were overwatching the venue itself, and that the whole area, specifically the whole area coming leading up from the water tower, we had no access or line of sight, I should say, to that area. And I asked the Secret Service members that we do not have the additional manpower to post anybody there, and I requested additional people to be posted there so there would be no access to those grounds.
And what response did you get?
That they would take care of it.
They would take care of it?
Yes.
And did you think that meant they would put it within their secured perimeter?
Whether they put it within their secured perimeter or they posted bodies, actual people there, that was my expectation of what was going to happen.
The task force says he didn't specify which agent made this comment, but he said it was during a conversation with 2 agents. One of the Butler ESU CAT team leaders also heard an agent respond to Blasco's concerns about the AGR by saying they'd take care of it. The site counterpart was asked whether she and the site agent were approached with these concerns.
Nobody approached me. That was not a conversation I took part of. If I would have been notified, I would have absolutely put a team there.
When the site agent was asked about it, she said,
I don't recall any specific concern about the AGR building. Nothing was brought up to me like, we have a major concern about this building. I don't recall seeing this person.
The lead advance agent said no one approached her and raised any concerns about the AGR building during the walkthrough, and she wasn't aware of concerns being raised to the site agent and site counterpart. Blasco says he also raised concerns to the Secret Service counter-sniper leader that day.
Once I explained this to him, he said, what we normally do in areas where we can't have eyes on, but there's an area that needs covered, we typically post an unarmed agent with a marked patrol unit in those areas.
The task force quoted this to the Secret Service counter-sniper leader, and he replied,
I imagine they heard me say armed agent and they misheard. I'm assuming. But they never expressed any concern to me about manpower issues, or problems covering the area, or not having enough manpower to basically fulfill the wishes. In talking to the locals, if we do have an area of legitimate concern, I will take counter-sniper response, which is one armed agent with one local law enforcement-like uniformed officer, and I can pre-position them in an area. However, I didn't pre-position any CS response to any of the local threats looking in. We didn't mention that the AGR building was going to have CS response in that area or anything along those lines.
Did they say anything about posting an agent or blocking, making opaque that fence line or both fence lines?
So we were told that they were going to post a opaque fencing along the line.
Blasco said he heard this from the Secret Service counter-sniper leader.
He goes, what I'm being told is we're going to be putting a fence around the area, an opaque fence that would block the view from people looking through the fence on the ground level.
But the counter-sniper leader denied this.
I've never heard anything about opaque covering, so that's new to me.
Butler ESU Deputy Commander Crawford also recalled the counter-sniper leader mentioning fencing.
He said it in like third person that he was informed or they were supposed to be putting a fencing or curtain translucent up across the fence.
At the last hearing, I had the chance to talk with Butler Township Police Department Patrolman Drew Blasco. I know that the Secret Service has testified that they don't remember those conversations. Did the Secret Service discuss the vulnerability with local police or anybody as to the AGR complex, that fence line, the property itself?
Congresswoman, what I can tell you is based on what my mission assurance inquiry has found is I cannot find a written communication where the AGR building was discussed. To me, that is glaring. That's a problem.
The Secret Service counter-sniper leader told the Senate he identified the AGR building as a vulnerability, and he and his partner in the Hercules 1 position on the South Barn were a key component of his mitigation plan. While both barn positions had a tree obstructing the view of part of the AGR roof, this Hercules 1 position could see the position Crooks fired from. Hercules 2 on the barn closest to AGR could not. The team lead described visiting the site 3 days before the rally to the Senate.
I actually climbed onto the center of the middle barn, and I took pictures from there.
Did you ever get on the barn where Hercules 1 was posted, before the event?
So yes, that day, actually, I got on both Hercules 1 and Hercules 2. The only reason I did that was to see if the roof could support our weight.
And so at what point did you learn that the roof facing AGR, closest to AGR, had an obstructed view? Was it when you got up on that barn roof?
I looked over at the AGR building, but I didn't really make a mental note of, hey, this is actually being blocked. It wasn't until later that I was actually doing the grids and doing a 360 that I went, I don't know if you can see that from Hercules 2, so I made note of that at the time. But Hercules 1, you had a clear line of sight, so I was okay with it.
But he told the task force he did notice while he was up there.
I did notice that it partially blocked part of the roof building. I took mental note of that.
The task force final report mentions the conflicting answers during these interviews and adds that a third interview suggests he didn't know about the obstruction until after the incident on July 13. His Hercules 1 partner on the South Barn, David King, didn't think he knew of the obstruction before the rally.
It just seemed like he didn't know about it prior to. Nothing was said that, he knew it was a blind spot.
The counter-sniper team lead said the Hercules team split the coverage between them. Hercules 1 covered the 9 to 12 and Hercules 2 covered 12 to 3. While they would check each other's side occasionally, the team that was covering the AGR roof, Hercules 2, had the worst view of it. The Senate interim report states, based on the estimated likely route Crooks took across the roofs of the AGR building starting at 6:05 on July 13, the Secret Service counter-snipers in the Hercules 1 position could have had a direct line of sight to him for at least part of his movements across the roofs. When shown the photograph above of these 3 roof peaks during the committee's interview, the Secret Service counter sniper team leader, who was in the Hercules 1 position, i.e. on the roof of the red barn on the right in the photograph above, acknowledged that with the view he had of the AGR building, if someone was standing on those 3 roofs or walking across them, he could have been able to see them.
From our position, you should have line of sight, yes.
The task force asked him why Hercules 2 was mainly looking at AGR instead of Hercules 1, who could see it better. He said,
"It's more that they were on that side. They're closer by 30 yards than we are on that side?"
Did you have a conversation with Sergeant King that Hercules 2 had an obstruction in their line of sight, and so he should be especially vigilant when looking in that direction at AGR?
We didn't have a specific conversation of, pay special attention to the AGR, they can't see it as well. That didn't happen, no.
He said he was facing the crowd most of the time.
How exactly were you mitigating that sightline obstruction if you were facing the crowd the majority of the time?
Well, the barn and the AGR roof is only one of the threat areas that we're charged with mitigating. It would be irresponsible to focus solely on the AGR building on the rooftop.
His partner said he only found out about the obstruction of the other team months later. The team lead was asked if he told Hercules 2 about the tree obstruction they had, to which he replied,
"I did not mention to them that they wouldn't be able to see the tree, unfortunately. I probably should have. However, I know from the southern side that I could see it with my team."
What steps did you take to remediate this sightline obstruction of the tree covering AGR?
Because we had 2 teams, it was not a factor.
The Senate and task force also interviewed one of the Hercules 2 snipers on the north barn.
The obstruction from the tree was identified when we assumed posts. We did not relay it to the lead counter sniper because it was assumed that he took the posts during his advanced procedures and chose that one, regardless of a line of sight issue with the trees, because the AGR building was to be secured by locals. When team lead says that the AGR building was secured, was owned by the local law enforcement, and that was the primary area with an obstructed view. Again, it wasn't the biggest red flag because a countermeasure was put in place for what you could consider a blind spot. When he said during the walkthrough that the locals owned the AGR building, meaning they have units around and inside, it implied that it's secure.
When the team lead was asked about these comments, he said,
"I would imagine the conversation happened on the day of the visit when I took them to the podium. You point out all the threat areas. When we got to the AGR building, I said, that's the building the locals are in. And I'm sure anybody just hearing it, you go, oh, locals are in the building, probably means it's secure. So possibly it was misconstrued as, locals got it, we're good."
Okay, so at no point did you articulate to the counter sniper team that you knew the locals were going to be patrolling that building. It was more just, we know the sniper team is in that building?
Yes.
He also said he believed the snipers in the AGR building had line of sight to the roof. Hercules 1 Sniper King said he understood the AGR snipers to be part of the plan to mitigate line of sight concerns from the building, as they could see out of their window onto the roof. He said that the tree was blocking part of the roof from his location as well, but he wasn't concerned because
you had the team on the second floor of the AGR building that was covering that line of sight.
The site counterpart said she asked the counter sniper team lead if he had any concerns about the AGR building after discussing concerns with Lieutenant Harold.
And he said that it would be covered with counter snipers, with the team. I don't know exact, quotes. But he said that he wasn't concerned. It's going to be covered.
When the team lead was asked about these comments, he said,
"I told her we did have teams on the roof, and we could see that area. Yeah, I don't think I was concerned about it. It wasn't a do not worry kind of deal. But that's the same concern we have with all threat areas looking in."
Is it more that you were not so concerned because you and your Secret Service colleagues had pretty good visibility from the barns? Or was it that the local sniper teams were in the AGR, and therefore you were not that worried?
Well, just to highlight, it was a concern. We're always worried about it. But I would say together, it would be both.
The site counterpart said,
"We said that we had banners, large banners. We had things that we could use for different lines of sight. But the campaign staff lead had said, no, to everything that we suggested. I was shocked to see that they were pushing back."
Lieutenant Harold, can you talk about whether or not there was a discussion about posting vehicles along either of those fence lines? Farm vehicles, trucks, buses?
On Thursday, well, even on Tuesday and Thursday, there was discussion about farm equipment that they were going to post. It was the campaign that was going to post farm equipment. And at one point, it was along the pond side of the stage, and then they were discussing about putting some farm equipment up above between the stage and the AGR building. So there was also a contact that was provided to the campaign about a resource that would be able to provide additional equipment to banners, trailers, some of the same equipment that was utilized in the 2020 rally.
Lieutenant Harold had pictures from 2020 site at the airport that I guess former President Trump attended the last time he was in that area. and he showed the staff lead these pictures and said, we can get this equipment, just let us know. Again, I had said, we can put porta potties, the vendors over there along the fence line. And everything that he said was, no, I have a press shot, I want to get my press shot. And then Friday morning, finally the lead agent had reached out and said, hey, campaign staff lead, trying to put these trucks. He has 4 trucks that you can use for line of sight. I thought, oh, thank goodness. I ran up to the site and again, I said, hey, there were these long Penske trucks, and again, I tried to put them in those positions that I wanted to block, those AGR buildings. And again, he said, no, it's in my press shot. And you can move them further up than, maybe the 2 o'clock, but he didn't want them on the shot.
She said she pulled in the campaign staff lead during the site agent's walkthrough with the detail's second supervisor on the 12th for them to discuss the plan moving forward.
Because, I tried to address the issue over and over, and I wasn't getting anywhere with it. I was kind of hoping that somebody would maybe pull me aside and say, hey, don't worry about what staff says. I want you to put, whatever you can find, or I want you to put, farm equipment.
Saturday morning when we showed up, I think there was one combine that was between the AGR building and the stage, and there was a few additional tractors that was on the opposite side, on the pond side of the farm show there from the stage.
Referring to 3 days before the Saturday rally, the lead advance agent said,
there were still discussions about farm equipment. Campaign staff kept saying, don't worry about it. There will be equipment. There will be screens and bleachers in place that will block line of sight from directions.
And the following day,
there were some Penske trucks and some other trucks that were on site that day, and we asked whether or not we could move those to block some line of sight concerns. Trump campaign staff did not agree with being able to use that equipment within the site. It would block their photos for their press shots.
She marked 3 X's along the middle perimeter between the AGR building and the barn to indicate where they would have been placed.
Those trucks were not used.
When the detail's second supervisor, Nick Menster, was asked about these comments, he said,
I recall using farm equipment for some line of sight. The Penske trucks, I did not have any awareness of. If those were denied, I certainly would have liked to have known about it.
When there's a disagreement between the campaign and the Secret Service on a security issue, who has the last word?
Usually what it boils down to is escalating it up to a supervisor and a senior staff level.
The site agent didn't raise a line of sight problem with Menster. When asked about her colleague's note about denied trucks, she said,
I have no clue what type of equipment they were referring to.
You weren't prevented or overruled in using any of those heavy equipment or trucks to mitigate line of sight issues?
No, sir.
As a good site agent, you should be there when the site is being built, things are being placed, and then if things are not where they should be or where you thought they should be, it should be escalated up to the detail second supervisor who arrives ahead of the protectee, or there is a mechanism. It was not exercised in this situation.
The detail second supervisor said of the July 12th walkthrough,
I believe I recall the site agent telling me she walked that area with the police and had a plan for that area with the uniform presence. And it was later, either during that walkthrough or shortly after that the lead advance agent joined us. She assured me that she had spoke to the counter sniper team, that they were confident they could cover those buildings in addition. They had the local counter sniper team at that specific location as well. I was briefed that there would be police officers on the AGR side of the fence.
Did you have any concerns with regard to the coverage of the AGR building as a vulnerability to the protectee?
No. The best counter snipers in the world told me they had it covered, and I was good with that.
According to the independent review panel, they issued a report in September, and in the report they wrote, a senior agent from the Trump detail, tasked with reviewing in person the site security setup in the run-up to the rally, did not engage in appropriate follow-up after a more junior detail member relayed generic information regarding how the AGR building would supposedly be secured. That was not consistent with the diagrammatic depiction of security resources in the site layout diagram. Are you familiar with this critique?
No.
Do you know who this critique is in reference to?
No.
Are there any other senior agents from the Trump detail tasked with reviewing in person the site security setup in the run-up to the rally, aside from you?
It was me and the campaign supervisor. That's it from the Donald Trump detail.
The Pittsburgh field office special agent in charge testified that he asked about AGR and was told by advance agents that roving police posts would cover the property, that it would be closed down for the day, that there would be a patrol car to block the parking lot, that there would be police in the double fence between the Butler Farm Show grounds and the AGR property, that there would be various obstructions to line of sight, and that there would be counter snipers. The Department of Homeland Security report states, no one from the Secret Service sufficiently probed for details about which specific law enforcement resources, if any, would be used to secure the area around the AGR building or address any concerns that might arise in that location. Given the AGR building's close proximity to the stage and attendant line of sight issues, and given that the service had assigned its state and local partners with responsibility for coverage of that area, The service should have conducted a robust analysis of exactly how the risks associated with that location were being mitigated, and the failure to do so falls not only on the agents developing the plan, but on their supervisors. Relying on a general understanding that the locals have that area covered is simply not good enough, and, in fact, at Butler this attitude contributed to the security failure.
In the months leading up to the July of 24, were you made aware of highly credible intelligence that a serious and grave threat to President Trump's life from an adversarial nation state? There was a very serious threat.
In this open setting, Congressman, I can't discuss what I was or was not aware of.
Well, the former Director Cheadle said she was aware, so I would imagine by extension you were aware. You said in open session that
I would point to Director Cheadle's.
All right, so you were aware.
So were you also aware there was a credible threat President Trump was facing? He was facing a heightened security threat to a foreign adversary?
Yes.
Was that on the minds of the Secret Service on July 13th, that there might be some threat from Iran?
Sir, we, as Deputy Director Abate just said, we're aware of the public sentiment and statements of the government of Iran to do harm to Donald J. Trump, and we use a threat-based model.
Now, was the threat from the nefarious nation state disseminated to agents in the field and in the protective details?
What I can tell you is that the Secret Service provided assets on that day for a particular.
What I can tell you, sir, is that the folks that are whistleblowing and informing some members of Congress say that they were not aware of this threat.
The task force final report states that 4 days before the rally, the Secret Service counter-snipers were requested and approved due to a long-range threat from a foreign state actor that was not specific to the rally on July 13. The detail's second supervisor said he called the lead advance agent and told her the snipers would be assigned to the event due to credible threat intelligence, and asked her to pass this on to her supervisor. The lead advance agent said,
I received a call on the 9th about credible intelligence, that he could not tell me what it was. I asked him to pass it on to my supervisor.
Her supervisor said this wasn't passed on to him, and he wasn't told of any threat. He said if he was aware of a threat, he would have pushed for a counter-surveillance unit. The detail's second supervisor also said he called the site agent about this threat, but the site agent said she wasn't involved in any such conversations. Senator Grassley's report states, according to Secret Service officials, this information was not more broadly shared across the Secret Service, partly because the information was highly classified. The general threat information provided to some Secret Service officials prior to the rally was not related to the Butler rally or to the July 13 gunman.
Would you agree that if there was a counter-surveillance unit there in Butler on the 13th, he would have been safer?
I think if there was a counter-surveillance unit advance that was on the ground, it could have aided the advance team in identifying the AGR.
So he would have been safer? President Trump
Yes.
would have been safer? Yeah, okay. I don't think this would have even occurred, but be that as it may, did the president's detail request a CSU, to your knowledge?
I'm not aware of a request for CSU.
The site counterpart wrote the following note after the event.
I'm a huge advocate of CSU and was surprised when I was told that's not an asset requested.
When the Senate asked her about it, she said,
I had asked the lead advance agent. She just basically said, yeah, it's not an asset that they're given.
When they asked the lead advance agent if she remembered discussing the lack of a CSU, she said,
I don't recall that. It's not a typical asset for an advance for a former president that I had worked at that time.
The task force final report states, had a CSU been utilised, the team would have been outside the outer perimeter looking for threats in areas of concern and could have identified the AGR complex as an unmitigated risk to the former president, or may have spotted Crooks before he climbed on top of the building. There were 3 opportunities for CSU assets to have been requested or assigned for July 13. The Office of Protective Operations, which proactively approved counter-snipers to all Trump outdoor events, the Trump detail and the advance team. The detail's second supervisor said there was a presumption a CSU wouldn't be approved for a former president. First Lady Jill Biden had a CSU for her small indoor event on the same day. Due to the unique nature of former President Trump's protective status at the time of the July 13 event, being both a former president and a candidate, OPO made 2 unprecedented decisions in regard to assets allocated to him compared to other former presidents. Those being the approval of a counter-assault team in April 2024 and approval of Secret Service counter-snipers at the beginning of July 2024. However, during the advanced planning of the July 13 event, there was a widespread assumption that only certain roles were entitled to certain assets, leading the detail and senior agents operating in advanced roles to not request a necessary asset to provide adequate protection. The Senate final report states, however, in the committee's review of Secret Service documents, it was discovered that CSU assets had twice been previously requested by the Trump detail and approved by Secret Service headquarters. The lead advance agent said,
The counter-surveillance advance was not requested, correct?
Did someone fulfill, in your mind, a counter-surveillance role?
Her answer is somewhat redacted, but she mentions 2 undercover Pennsylvania state police officers arranged through the Protective Intelligence Advance as a response team.
It was an asset the Protective Intelligence Advance had told site agents and myself that they would have outside the perimeter.
The CSU function, had you gotten one from Secret Service, that person's role was fulfilled at least on paper by the Pennsylvania State Police Plan?
Having manpower out there that day, yes.
Were they out and about, or were they more of a response if there's a reason to go out there?
They should have been out on the perimeter all day. On the subsequent Senate report that had come out, I read that Pennsylvania State Security Room personnel had actually dispatched them to go towards the AGR and go find the shooter.
There's that team, the undercover Pennsylvania State Police team.
Yes.
Totally separate from that, there's Secret Service counter-sniper response?
Yes.
And then, separate from that, there's Agent
Protective Intelligence Response.
The counter-sniper response agent, usually contacted by snipers to respond to threats, was paired with a PSB trooper and located inside the perimeter. The PI response agent was too, and her role was to interview suspicious persons. These 2 pairs, along with the pair of undercover PSP officers, all looked unsuccessfully for Crooks on July 13, as we will see later. Counter-unmanned aircraft systems are used to detect drones. Senator Grassley's report states, the Donald Trump Protective Division requested enhanced C-UAS equipment for detection and mitigation. However, the specialized division personnel from the Technical Security Division did not provide these enhanced C-UAS capabilities. A Secret Service division official reported to us that these resources had already been allocated for the Republican and Democratic national conventions. The C-UAS operator described his system as passive, just detecting something, while the requested system was more active. He said he hadn't used the requested system.
So if it would have came to Butler on the 13th, there would also have been a person who would operate it. It would be more than just the system.
He said he'd been in the anti-drone team for 3 months and received less than an hour's training. He didn't go through any troubleshooting procedures during training. Senator Grassley's report states, the Secret Service did not adhere to requirements that personnel complete training before undertaking CUAS activities set forth by the Secret Service for operating CUAS. Secret Service officials told us that no such requirements for the equipment used that day were needed. According to the Secret Service, the CUAS used at the rally did not have the capability to mitigate a UAS system and only had detection capability. Secret Service officials also said that they do not believe a policy is necessary for operating CUAS equipment used for detection purposes only, and likened it to turning on a flashlight, meaning that it is simple to use. The PSP offered to provide drones. The task force final report states, although Special Agent Castro testified it would have been easy to incorporate the use of a local drone into the Secret Service security plan, it was ultimately not done. Castro testified he did not want to disrupt or add to the existing plan, and he did not feel he was in a position to accept local law enforcement's offer of drone assistance. He said he noticed problems with the system around 11:30 on the morning of the rally. He said,
So once I noticed the system was becoming inactive, or not becoming active, I contacted a member of my detail who had more experience with it. And then ultimately he gave me the number to C-UAS headquarters from DC. He gave me the number to tech support, and I spoke to them several times throughout the day.
Sometime after 2 p.m. he told the detail's second supervisor and the site agent the system was down.
At some time after 4 p.m., I get a call back from tech support and says that another person from tech support had looked at my system that was connected, and it looked like 2 boxes. Please don't ask me what these boxes are, it's beyond me. But 2 boxes were not talking to each other, and to try to change out an Ethernet cable between those 2 boxes. I switched out the cables, and shortly after the system became active. And at 4:33 I contacted the detail's second supervisor to let him know that the system was active.
The DHS report states, in the afternoon of July 13, during the period when the detection system was down, Crooks flew a drone in the vicinity of the farm show grounds, presumably for purposes of site surveillance and probing. Crooks ran his drone for approximately 11 minutes beginning at 3:51 p.m, and the drone approached within approximately 200 yards of the Butler farm show grounds. Had the detection system been operating as intended, it is likely that Crooks' drone operation would have been detected and pinpointed, which would have triggered a law enforcement encounter with him. The operator said,
Me being the person that last used it and bringing it down from Bedminster, I knew that it was operational and working.
And when was the last time you used it there?
It was a couple of days before.
You did not think at all to even turn on your equipment on the 12th to see if it was working the day before?
Correct.
And what was your plan if the asset did not work the morning of the 13th?
Well, that's why I set it up in the morning, just so I can troubleshoot it.
The Secret Service established and managed the primary command post for communication in the office of the Butler Farm Show.
The lead advance agent said she invited locals into the security room.
During the police meeting that we had on July 8th, I invited and requested any local and state law enforcement that was going to have any assets or personnel involved with the July 13th event to have personnel in the security room.
What local officials took you up on that offer?
To my knowledge, there was a Pennsylvania State Police in that security room, and there was a Butler Emergency Services in that room. It was phrased to the entire group, asking all participants that were going to be involved to have representation.
Her supervisor said he heard this invitation at the briefing.
Towards the end of it, there's an invitation for the security room to say that we're going to have a security room at the site.
Do you recall specifically if Special Agent Banks said we would like one from every entity?
Yes.
But when PSP Lieutenant Harold was asked if he heard it, he said no.
I did not. I just knew that I was going to have PSP represented in the command post with Secret Service. I don't recall having an invite to put somebody there. Somebody from Butler Emergency Management Agency had mentioned that they were going to bring their mobile command post, and the state police had nothing to do with that.
The Emergency Management Agency falls under the Department of Emergency Services, which provided the mobile command post.
The county had referenced their mobile command post on Monday. During Thursday meetings with Secret Service, the command post was established at the Farm Show office, the main office there coming through the main gate. That's where we opted to put our sergeant and the command post with Secret Service.
Referring to the meeting with the Secret Service at the barracks on Tuesday, July 9th, the Department of Emergency Services director said,
"We discussed where our stuff was going, like where we wanted to set up for, treatment of anybody who may be there, or where our command post was going to be set up. Knowing the site and knowing that there's not a lot of air-conditioned resources there, at the very least, we could use it as a rest and respite center."
The task force asked the lead advance agent when this local command trailer was brought up. She said,
"It was during the meeting at the barracks. They had a hazmat trailer as well as like a command trailer, and they wanted to bring those to bring to the site."
All right. What was their purported reasoning for wanting that there?
They didn't have an actual reason. We welcome hazmat, obviously. We didn't have a hazmat team traveling with us, so that was a welcome asset. I used both assets to be able to protect line of sight on the other side of the site. The Butler EMS staff that was at the meeting were the ones that said we're bringing these to the site.
The Emergency Medical Services is coordinated by the Department of Emergency Services, and the terms EMS and DES are sometimes used interchangeably.
And I think you've made this clear, but at no point was the implication that local law enforcement was going to be using that as a trailer in lieu of the Secret Service?
No, that was where the discussion was, where they said there will only be one guy in there.
Got it. And again, to make it clear, had that ever been brought to your attention, that would have contradicted the plan, and you would have spoken up about that?
If they wanted to use that as the command post or as the security room, then we would have had a discussion about that.
Was a priority for you, though, at that point to ensure that there was one central hub for a security room or command post?
Yes. The understanding, in talks that I had with the local law enforcement, was that they would have one person in that command truck, and that they would have representation in the security room.
And you said this was your understanding from talking to whom?
From the meetings that I had with Butler Emergency Services and Pennsylvania State Police on the 9th.
The Department of Emergency Services did place one person in the security room and one person in the trailer, while the PSP decided to only place one person in the security room. The site agent said,
"When I spoke with Lieutenant Harold from PSP, from the Pennsylvania State Police, it was more like to utilize that trailer for line of sight at the 10 o'clock or the 3 o'clock position, ground level. Initially, they said, well, we can bring a truck just to use as a downtime room. Because otherwise, I will probably say something and say, no, you have every single person would need to be inside the security room."
When the site counterpart was asked if she was aware of a second command post on the morning of the rally, she said,
"So that is not the case. We didn't have a second command post. Butler EMS asked during the advance week if they could bring their mobile command, Emergency Medical Command Center for medical emergencies. It wasn't a secondary law enforcement command post."
PSP Lieutenant Harold was asked about these comments and said,
I do recall some discussion about that. That trailer was going to handle the majority of the medical calls, and that was the reason why PSP didn't staff it. We opted to put one of our portables in there so that they could monitor. I think they were also monitoring like the motorcade that was rolling too, so that's why we put our portable in that trailer.
The DES person in the trailer said the PSP portable radio didn't work. The task force interim report states that Butler ESU addressed interoperability with the PSP by receiving this radio. but the radio did not work well and the reception was very poor. The footnotes attribute some of these statements to Commander Lenz's interview with the task force. All throughout the task force's interim and final reports, they reference many of the 46 interviews they conducted, citing the relevant page numbers so readers can consult the sources themselves. Except you can't read Lenz's interview. His is the only one of the 46 that has been withheld from the public. While he spoke at the task force hearing pictured, local law enforcement were not asked any difficult questions there.
Thank you, Commander Lenz. Appreciate it. And I know how heartfelt this has been for you and how gut-wrenching it has been for you because we talked right after this. That's the purpose of today's hearing. Local law enforcement has gone through way too much. So we're going to get to the bottom of it. The work you did today was exceptional. Thank you.
You're all real-life heroes.
Thank you all for your service.
My thanks for your service to community and to country.
I want to join my colleagues in thanking you for your service.
Thank you for the work that you do. I want to join in expressing my gratitude to all of you.
I know how deeply wounded you were after that event because the first time anybody pointed fingers at anybody, it was at local law enforcement. They didn't do their job. You being here today is a validation of what you did that day, your commitment to that day, and going over and above what you normally would have done.
Besides learning his explanation for not updating his snipers in the AGR building that a suspicious person was on the roof next to them, it would be helpful to hear Lenz explain how he ended up in the local command trailer rather than the Secret Service security room. Unfortunately, we'll have to rely on the interviews that weren't withheld. The DES person in the security room was the director. He was at the July 8th briefing. His testimony is a bit vague and hard to corroborate, but it hints at why local law enforcement used his department's trailer as a communication center. We begin with what might be a misunderstanding. The task force asked him,
"And when did you learn that you'd be assigned to be in the security room?"
Probably the Thursday. It really wasn't an assignment. It was asked by the Secret Service for one person from the county to be in there, and by default, I was there.
This would make sense if the Secret Service asked for one person from the County Department of Emergency Services. It wouldn't make as much sense if they asked for only one person from the county, including all law enforcement as well, the police department, the sheriff's office, and the ESU.
Who from the county asked you to be in the command post?
Nobody asked me from the county. I'm the ultimate in charge of the county emergency services side of it for my staff. It wasn't very clear what our responsibilities were, but I knew from in the past it was completely different from when we were there in 2020, because they had elements of law enforcement, fire, and EMS in there at that time. This time, they didn't ask for any of that. They didn't make it clear they wanted anybody in there, they just wanted one person. So my understanding was that I would act as a liaison between them and whatever county assets that they needed to talk to.
And by county assets, are you referring to emergency medical services assets?
Correct.
He said his role was primarily dispatching medical teams for people struggling with the heat. He also said,
"If they would have offered everybody to be in the same room, then we probably wouldn't have needed our command post, other than to use it as a cooling area."
And when did you start to think about using it as more than an air-conditioned site?
Whenever we had communications with some of the assets that they didn't have any place to go.
When you refer to assets, who are you talking about that raised these concerns?
Police and fire.
At any point, was there a suggestion or discussion around those assets using the Secret Service command post?
Not to my knowledge.
Did you ever request from Secret Service that you can use their site?
No. They asked for one person to be in, that was it.
And you said one person from the county?
Correct.
Did you understand that to mean one person from Butler County EMS specifically, or just one person from the county?
Just one person from the county. It wasn't like they said, "We want somebody from the ESU team, we want somebody." They just said one person from the county. The ESU team command staff, they have multiple people that they use, and they need to have some of the access to the things we have in the command post, our command post, because it's set up for them.
What were those things?
So access to a dispatch console, which we did not have in the security room.
Did the Secret Service command post have a dispatch console similar to local command posts?
I don't know. They had some radio system that I didn't recognize.
And then there was a conversation to the effect of, "You might as well come to this trailer. We have all the equipment."
More or less, yes. And I'm only speaking for myself. You know, they spoke to me and said one person from the county. I don't know what they spoke to the local police. I don't know what they spoke to the ESU.
The task force mentioned this to the lead advance agent.
There was some thought on the local side that, hey, we weren't invited. But even more specifically than that, there seems to have been an idea that the Secret Service communicated to the locals somewhere that only one representative from the county was officially invited into the security room.
That was never communicated from me. My communication had been that all people that were going, all entities that were going to be involved were recommended and invited to be in the security room, to have someone in the security room. It was never iterated from me that it was supposed to be just one representative.
The task force asked the side agent,
Did you understand the Secret Service security room to be set up to have enough space for all the local law enforcement partners?
Yes.
The DES director was asked.
So Secret Service, they asked you to be there in sort of an undefined capacity. Did they imply you should be an all-county liaison?
They didn't. It was an undefined capacity. Just somebody from the county in the command post. They did not specifically say a role.
Though he makes clear throughout his interview that he was focused on medical duties and wasn't a representative or liaison for local law enforcement, the task force final report falsely states otherwise. Butler, DES director, participated in the advanced planning process, brought the local command post trailer for law enforcement to use during the campaign event, and acted as the local law enforcement representative in the Secret Service security room for communications purposes on July 13. When the task force asked the director if he was meant to act as a communication linkage to the DES person in the trailer, he said,
"No, there wasn't the ability to link things. Nobody called me directly on the radio from that command post."
The DES person in the trailer said that because the director was busily transmitting from his radio to the fire EMS side, he would never have heard them call even if they tried.
Do you know if the Secret Service, again in a different area, was able to listen to your local radio frequencies that day?
So there would have been an encrypted police radio in the command center. I believe it was being used by the emergency services side, so fire and EMS. But I believe they treated around 250 patients for heat-related stuff that day. So that radio was nonstop. So even if that radio was scanning and had the capability to hear our channels, they would not have been able to do so just because of the amount of traffic. It's not feasible to have everybody communicate on the same channel just because of the amount of radio traffic. However, a unified command post, as we're all taught in many different FEMA classes, a unified command post solves that issue.
There is no good reason for the DES director to be the sole person from the county in the security room. Having law enforcement elsewhere complicated communications. The task force final report summarizes like this. Due to local law enforcement being under the impression that they would not be in the security room, the Butler DES director decided to provide the Butler County Command Post trailer for local law enforcement use.
Sergeant Lentz, understand that you are the commander of the Butler County Emergency Services Unit, and as commander, my understanding is you were in the local command trailer, along with your deputy commander and representatives from the Butler County Sheriff's Department and the Butler Township Police Department, as well as, of course, the emergency services on that day. Meanwhile, my understanding is that the Secret Service security room included representatives from the Secret Service, from the state police, and also from the Butler County Emergency Services. Just to start, is that a fairly accurate portrayal of who was where then?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you describe then some of the radio frequencies that were used by those various agencies? And I'll start with the Butler Police Department. What frequencies were they operating under?
Sure. So the Butler Township Police Department was using a channel we call PD Ops 3. The tactical police units, we were using PD Ops 4. And the Sheriff's Office was using the Sheriff's Operations channel.
Also, the task force final report states that the Secret Service used at least 3 channels, the Pennsylvania State Police used 2, and the emergency services used another channel. Local law enforcement and state police couldn't listen to each other. Commander Lenz, who happened to have personal familiarity with PSP Sergeant Oleo, successfully relied on his cell phone to pass along information from local officers to PSP and the Secret Service. For information from local law enforcement to get to the Secret Service around Trump, they would have to radio it to the ESU commander in the local command post, who would have to call the PSP sergeant in the security room by phone, who would have to verbally pass that on to the security room supervisor, who would have to radio it to the Secret Service near the stage. The security room supervisor said he didn't realize there was a second command post until he heard the PSP sergeant talking to others, but he didn't consider it to be an issue. The lead advance agent said she saw the counter-assault team advance lead give a radio to a Butler ESU officer. The Senate responded,
One of the Butler ESU officers had a Secret Service radio that day?
Yes.
What Butler ESU officer?
They were all in camo. I didn't see a nameplate. But I had a conversation with a CAT advance lead from Secret Service prior to that day that he was going to meet at the motorcade with a radio from Secret Service, and he was going to give it to Butler ESU. Once we arrived and I came out of the tent, I saw that Butler ESU unit go up to the CAT advance lead and be handed a Secret Service radio.
Do you know if the plan for the CAT advance lead to give a radio to someone from Butler ESU, if that's documented anywhere?
I don't know if it's documented. It was briefed over a briefing call. If you see my handwritten notes, it is written on my handwritten notes that that radio transfer was going to happen.
The Senate interim report briefly addresses this in a footnote after stating they couldn't confirm that Secret Service or local law enforcement had a radio from each other. The Secret Service lead advance agent told the committee that she believed she saw the Secret Service counter-assault team advance exchange a radio with a Butler ESU officer. However, the counter-assault team advance told the committee that he did not exchange radios with any Butler ESU personnel. Similarly, Butler ESU told the committee none of their personnel exchanged radios with Secret Service personnel on July 13. The Secret Service counter-snipers were offered ESU radios but didn't take them.
Did Butler County ESU, your unit, provide particular radios for the Secret Service or set aside radios for the Secret Service?
We did.
You did. Did you personally call the Secret Service counter sniper teams and remind them to pick up their particular radios on the morning of J13?
So I had spoken to them at the walkthrough and offered the radios.
That was on Thursday.
Correct. And then the day of the rally, our sniper team leader, when they did their face-to-face, he reminded them that the radios...
Yes, did they ever pick up those radios?
They did not.
The ESU sniper team leader said he met with the Secret Service counter-sniper team leader at the grandstands around 4 hours before Trump took the stage.
I said, hey, when we're done, you're going right past our command post. I said, they should have radios for you. It was in close proximity to them, and they said, yeah, no problem.
The Secret Service counter-sniper team lead said,
they mentioned radios on the Thursday I did the walkthrough. They mentioned they had a brand new radio system put in place. The day of the event, they mentioned if I went over to the police mobile command unit that I could try to get some radios. That way we could be on it. I said, absolutely, that sounds great. Thank you. And then we went back to start getting my equipment ready. But the Secret Service radios, we were having interference on our channels. We went onto the roof because we have to go up prior to protect the arrival, so we didn't have time to grab those radios.
He got onto the roof about 3 hours after being reminded of the radio offer.
Did you consider sending one of your counter-sniper teammates while you were working on the radios to the local command center to get radios?
I did not consider. That would have been great. I did not at the time.
The task force final report states, Counter-sniper team lead suggested in his mission assurance review interview that he was not aware of the opportunity to obtain a local radio at the time of that interview, which raises a possible conflict with his task force testimony. Sergeant Technician King, his Hercules 1 partner, testified to the task force that switching his radio frequency was a relatively brief process, raising a further question regarding the extent to which the change in frequency prevented counter-sniper team lead from obtaining a local radio. But King, who was also there when the radio was offered, wasn't concerned about it.
We could have gone to secondary communications, which is a phone or email. And in all my years of being with the counter-sniper team and with the Secret Service, I've never been given a local's handheld radio.
About a year after the shooting, 6 Secret Service personnel were suspended without pay, mostly due to planning failures. These are the only known punishments for everything. The lead advance agent was suspended for 14 days for failing to mitigate line-of-sight issues and ensure local law enforcement was in the security room. The site agent was suspended for 42 days for the same issue regarding the security room, as well as failing to secure the AGR building. She was also suspended for 1 day for speaking to the media without authorization. The site counterpart was suspended for 14 days for failing to assist the site agent to make the site secure. The Pittsburgh Field Office Supervisor was suspended for 14 days for inadequately overseeing the work of the advance team. His Assistant Supervisor was suspended for 10 days for similar reasons. The counter-sniper team lead was suspended for 35 days for not ensuring snipers were positioned for maximum and unobstructed coverage and not co-locating the teams or utilising the local radio offer. His conflicting testimony was mentioned. Another reason relates to the day of the rally, which is covered in the next part of this series. He received info and pictures about a suspicious person with a rangefinder and emailed them to the other Secret Service snipers, but didn't notify anyone else. This is basically the only action from the day mentioned in the disciplinary documents. So as you watch all the mistakes shown in the next part of this series that focuses on the day of the rally, know that almost all of them have gone unpunished. The security room supervisor failed to pass on vital information, but was found not to be in violation of Secret Service policy and cleared by the review. While the field office supervisors were disciplined for lack of oversight, the detail supervisors were not. In fact, Detail Special Agent in Charge Sean Curran was later promoted and became the new director of the Secret Service. The Senate interim report states, Crooks also prepared for July 13, searching online for details on how to build an explosive and researching how the rally would be set up. The following timeline is from the task force final report. On July 5, Crooks conducted internet searches for when is the DNC convention and when is the RNC in 2024. He also searched for information about the Butler Farm Show and a nearby hospital. On July 6, Crooks conducted internet searches for how far was Oswald from Kennedy, where will Trump speak from at the Butler Farm Show podium, and Butler Farm Show photos. He also registered to attend the July 13 campaign event. On July 7, Crooks drove near the Butler Farm Show grounds and conducted a brief walkthrough near the exterior fence line before departing to examine the nearby AGR complex. On July 8, Crooks conducted an internet search for AGR International. On July 9, Crooks conducted internet searches for Butler Farm Show photos and AGR International. He also conducted internet searches for ballistic calculator. On July 10, Crooks searched weather in Butler and purchased a Swiss Gear backpack at a store in Bethel Park. On July 12, the day before the rally, Crooks visited a local gun range, Clairton Sportsman Club in Clairton, Pennsylvania. On July 13, Crooks was seen many times, but a botched security response failed to stop him getting on the roof of AGR and shooting Trump and others at the rally, as we will cover step by step in the next and most important part of this series.